this is the end of our 7th month together. And yeah, I can only imagine what's been going on in your own body and your mind. But I'm sure it's been intense, and hoping it's been intensive. In the long term, we would definitely be glad to hear what it's like, what it's been like, what it is like to be inside your system. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Really excited about this call. This is the second read, and I'm hoping that we can create a weaving together of a lot that's come up regarding what's in the body, what's embodying, what's embodied. All right, I wanted to ask Irene to maybe update us on her special project. She's way down there in Colombia, and her project more or less projects upon a lot of the themes and topics that are going to come up today. So I think it's a really good intro. She's doing a long-term addiction program, and I would love to hear how that's working, maybe to inspire us to also like more or less inform us, because these themes are going to be coming up in our own domains. I wanted to ask as well, like Carolyn from the UK, but she's not here with us today. Like there's some really interesting things happening in the jails in Scotland, and she and Lisa are going to be going to the US to work on this really big program in the prison system in America. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Sophie's going to be joining us as well, but she just has a class right now, so she's going to be a bit late. She did this really powerful, profound program in an asylum in Belgium for children, and apparently like it was quite amazing and like super deep, partly scary, and there are some things that happen there as well that's going to be quite relevant. So the one we have here with us is Irene. So I would like to invite you, Irene, on what has been in the bodies in Colombia. When we think about addiction, Colombia could come up. It's almost like a going back to the source, not just the source of the drug, but source of the spirit of healing, and you know, where things can come full circle. So I think there's a lot that can speak through Irene's process. Like I met her almost exactly a year ago, and she was talking to me about this possibility that this could happen there. And now it's been a year, and now it's happening. So if you can unmute, I would love to maybe help you open this red space.
Hi, fine. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Caroline is here as well, just so
Caroline,
you know.
good.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, this has been very interesting. We are about halfway through the program, so we're doing like about a 3-month program, 6 sessions. Maybe I'll do 7, but for now it's 6, and we've been through 3 of them. And actually yesterday we had the last one, and we did like a pre-test, and then in the middle we're going to do another test to see how it's going. So we just did that yesterday, but I don't have the results yet. I can share in the chat when I get them to see the progress and what participants are feeling. But meanwhile, I can share a little bit just what comes right now. The first thing is, it's been interesting working with addiction, because in this group, I can feel that addiction, like the opposite of addiction, is not only sobriety or for people to stop consuming the substance or even a behavior, because this group we also have behavioral addiction. but maybe the opposite is more like connection. And I can really feel that this group has shown up for themselves. I was kind of not biased, but John, the guy I'm doing this program with, he warned me. He said this group has a lot of psychic resistance. These people they're very much in their head, and I said to him, it's okay, let's just experiment with no attachment and see what comes up. And I have been surprised, especially to see some of the inner dance principles showing up. So the first one, for example, the responsibility. So people have been sharing how they have like before they used a substance. For example, this woman shared that she used to smoke a lot, and during this program suddenly she realized that she is not smoking anymore, or that she after lunch she doesn't need the cigarette or the smoke in usual times that she usually takes it. But she shared how and why is this. So I asked her, why do you think this is? And she said, I just feel more connected to myself. I don't, I realized that this comes out of a need to feel something inside of me as if I was empty somehow, and now I feel more full. So this has been like a common thing that I have witnessed, the connection. The opposite of addiction is more connection with both something higher than ourselves, and the group. Showing up for the group has been very powerful. I think they all feel also that they contribute to the group. The other thing that has been interesting is the autonomy, because even if some of you are thinking of doing a project like this, I would definitely recommend to do it live, like in person. For me, this was not possible for all of the sessions. I did 2 of them in person, and now I'm doing it online. And even though I do think it would be so much richer to be there in person, but I can also see at the same time the benefit of this, because especially with this group, and I could sense that in the first 2 sessions, it will be very easy for them to think that maybe the facilitator is the one that's doing something. And so the fact that I can't be there, and that they have to show up and just lie there in the space and trust and just be there and feel safe without someone else actually having to be there for them, even though we are, it's been very powerful. Like right now, they just come in, they lie down, they relax. At the beginning, there were a lot of questions like, what happens if I lose control? What happens if I get a panic attack? And they were really worried about this. But now they just go and trust in themselves. And I think that has been very powerful to kind of interrupt the dependency pattern. So that has also been a benefit, and I think it worked out that way. It was not a coincidence. The other thing that has been very interesting has been the sleep, because we're doing the sleep playlist in between sessions. So also to kind of see the conditioning and limiting beliefs we all have around sleep. So they started to share how sometimes some of them, as they listen to the sleep playlist, they're sleeping less, or maybe they wake up. And then I go, okay, and when you wake up or if you sleep less, how do you feel during the day? And it's like a light bulb comes up, and suddenly they realize that, yes, I slept less, or I woke up at 4 in the morning, but I'm not tired. Like before, I used to sleep 8 hours, but all the day they were tired, they needed to do a nap. And now many of them are sleeping less, but they have energy during the day, and they feel again connection, like a connection, a motivation to get up, to show up. And last thing I want to share is this responsibility of, I've noticed that they started, a lot of them, or I think all of them, also have anxiety. So it's more kind of like a dual pathology, as they call it in psychology. And before they shared how they try to either distract themselves from this uncomfortable feeling by using the substance or anything else, and or try to fix it, start breathing, it's okay, trying to talk to themselves that it's okay. And now they have shared that they can just sit with the uncomfortable feeling and witness it in their bodies. So again, it is so connected with how inner dance is a remembrance of the body, and going back to the body in a more metaphorical way as well, not just the physical body of feeling the sensation, but also understanding that in the body is where the actual healing takes place. That these people are very much in their mind. They share how every day since they wake up to they go to sleep, they're thinking. So in these brief moments of a crisis, this crisis kinds of is like more of a portal to go into the body and that wisdom and let the healing happens. And then they share how they felt better afterwards. So last thing we've done is I've had a feedback channel, which is a WhatsApp group. I really think that's a really good thing to have if you're thinking about projects like this, where people can feel witnessed and when people can share what they're going through in the moment, not only remembering afterwards for the session, but like in that moment, because you can just hold space for them and they can also hold space for themselves as they write. It's they're kind of translating something that they've never been able to connect. And so writing it down, I feel really helps. And these are their shares, like sitting with the emotion and then being surprised of how it transmutes into something else. So I'm really looking forward to the results for this first half of the program. I will definitely share them with you. I do think it's important to not be attached, excited. I'm very excited, but not attached to anything that comes up. And so I'll share them with you. Thank you for.
That's really amazing. And that you're doing this within the system, that you are working with a highly respected medical practitioner who also leads medical institutions, and that you're going to come away with this with data, which is so needed, so that any one project can then lead to a whole bunch of other projects anywhere in the world, just like with the project that we had with the jails in Manila. Now there are all these projects to do with prisons and jails, and like how we started with the one school. Now there are so many projects to do with educational systems emerging, and so I want to hear from Carolyn, as jails and prisons might also be amazing to bring up in the red. So now we move up northwest.
Yeah. So I've just finished listening to your call from the other day, Pi. So really feeling into when you're speaking about touch, and it's interesting. I'm noticing that the more trust that is deepening and developing within the group, the more fear and mistrust that is happening within the system and the space around us. So there has been something shifting within the group that I work with, where they're going to much deeper spaces. And the paradox is I'm arriving at reception and the staff are becoming more and more activated by my presence, even though I'm now there weekly, to the point where they've been searching my bags. I now need to switch my laptop and my iPads on where I never used to. I was quite naive. I brought in some crystals and some rose oil and some instruments, and for weeks I'd been allowed to just go in without question, and then all of a sudden I got stopped. And did you know that this crystal's a weapon? And did you know that these little symbols they're metal, so they could be used to hurt people? And I'm just so struck by one. how I just don't think like that, and my naivety of I'm just walking into a prison with all these beautiful things, and the uniformed guards are really distressed by that. But in the last few weeks, the guys were now, I might sometimes bring in rose oil, and they want to wear it so that they can have a direct experience with these high vibrations. And I've started laying oracle cards out for them at the end of the, when they're lying down. So they wake up to a card that they weren't expecting to see. And then they're all gathering a ring round and wanting to know if the card resonates with their life experiences. And it's quite striking to see some of these like really big guys that might have been in there for a very long time. Like, what does this card mean? Can you read the story to me? And gosh, that really hits home. I feel that. Yeah. So I'm bringing in more and more comforts from home, which they're enjoying very much. And they're becoming more and more excited about the sessions. So I'm now going in weekly because the demand is so high. More and more of the guys are signing up to go down the path of recovery, in part so that they can experience innerdance for themselves. But there's something about touch, and they're so touch deprived. And how I'm trying to navigate attending to that, and also trying to help them in their own processes, so that I'm not they're not feeling me too much, but they're also receiving something of my touch. I notice that how I'm supporting them seems to help them to go really down and inward. There might be some twitching, their hands move, feet move, and overall it's very much an internal process. There might also be some fear there, even though I try to reassure them that they can make sound, they can move their bodies. I'm also aware they're in a system where if they were to have an outburst, that might be perceived as an act of aggression or threat. Don't know what I'm trying to say here. But there's something about, I have an intention when I'm offering touch that I want to communicate love and trust, and how I can make even 30 seconds of touch feel like 30 minutes. And each of them are feeding that back, that they feel that the touch is staying with them, and that there's something deeply reassuring about that they feel very held. The majority of them are reporting phenomena where they're meeting friends and family who've died when they've been on the inside, and they're able to have those conversations that they couldn't have. One guy last week, he said that the smell of the rose oil took him to his sister's grave, and he was able to sit by her grave and talk to her and smell the flowers. And yeah, I'm so moved by that. And then he made a drawing of it afterwards for his room. And then I'm also noticing a phenomena, so that most of them are battling addiction from hard drugs, and there's almost a misperception. They might describe, not very much happened today. And then they'll go on to describe a list of phenomena, that they went into deep space and they've never felt more relaxed in their lives, and it feels like they've had 8 hours sleep, and they'll list all of these things, and it's like, that doesn't sound like not very much happened. So there's something about how I don't know, maybe it's a compare and contrast to those great highs that they've experienced through their addiction, that when another transformational experience happens because it doesn't look and feel the same, that they're not able to acknowledge how profound it is. Like I'll show you, one guy said, not very much happened. Now, I don't agree with that because I could feel the energy of him. But then he drew this picture. This is what happened, but not very much happened. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting that you could, the paradox of that. It feels like not very much is happening. And I'm sure I read somewhere in a book about dopamine that can happen, that when we've had those kind of peak highs with substances, that it can kind of rewire our understanding or comprehension of other ways of being and knowing. It's tiring work being in those spaces. Like once a fortnight, I could feel that I needed really time to replenish. Now I'm in weekly. It takes time to restore myself. But there's great change happening. I can feel it. And one of the wardens spontaneously suggested that maybe I could come in on another day so that some of the staff could lie down and have a session. And I mean, I love that. I love when someone comes up with an idea like that. And I was at the recovery walk 2 weeks ago, and there were over like 150 visitors from different organizations, and they've all heard of the work. And I'm like, wow, okay, so things are happening. I don't see and hear all of those things, but there's definitely a ripple effect. And I had another email again about another couple of prisons in Scotland. We're just having to try to figure out funding. And as you mentioned, Pi, Lisa and I are going to be going to America at the end of January to do some documented work in the decision's been made. It'll be the largest women's prison in LA, and then a medium men's security prison, and perhaps working with men who had been on death row. And then there's some other prisons that are interested. But it might be over the course of like 6 months that we go backwards and forwards to all these different prisons. Yeah, this is not what I expected. I didn't ever think I'd work in a prison, and now I'm working in quite a few. I don't know, it's really hard. I have to find a way to articulate it with more clarity when I'm not actually in the prison space. When I'm in the prison, I can really, I feel it with them. When I'm trying to describe it, when I'm not in that space, I haven't quite mastered the art of that yet. So I'm curious about touch, because first of all, I have a belief system about not getting in people's ways. So sometimes I would err on the side of caution and kind of hold back a little bit. And then I spoke to the guys and said, is there enough touch happening in the sessions? And they said no. I'm like, right, okay, so now I have your permission, or your consent to kind of be more of myself, so you guys can be more of yourselves. And so it feels right, the type of touch that I'm offering. Also knowing that there's almost like a ministering to them in a way. It's not like another type of setting, like in a yoga center, where people might be more resourced and there's more capacity to go into those dark, deep spaces on their own for longer periods of time. And I'm aware how highly traumatized these guys have gone through so much, and that this non-transactional touch can mean so much to them, because they might never be touched again for weeks, months, years. So I have to trust myself with this, that I'm not interrupting their process. It's supporting them to go to those places so they can surrender. Yeah.
Amazing, profound, beautiful, touching, both of your sharings, really, from the global south and the global north. Yeah, and I think this is going to really help us to go into the core of the red. So thank you so much, Carolyn. And I think this is important that then we hear about these stories while it's happening, while it's fresh. And this is a form of documentation, but then obviously like there's like a lot there that you can't speak. So this is what I suggest that you also get in touch with Rosa, because the same feedback that you have given about the resistance from the system, she's meeting it now. The long-term project they actually have been holding in Manila City Jail, I think they might need to take a break because there is something about there being a peak point in which so much depth is happening, and then there's some fear there. But then she's getting invited to other prisons, other jails. So it would be good to touch base, and she might be able to get inspired by how you're also able to navigate the system. We're healing not people, but what is in the people, which seems to be outside, but it's the system. We are speaking to the system. So the dialogue is so vital right now. All right, so thank you. Let's get into the red. And I'm glad we are here talking about the jails, because I think the red is in essence about freedom. It's about liberation. Like there's something about freedom. We go to my book now. It's almost hard for me to speak after listening to both of you. Okay, let me know if you can't see my screen, which tends to happen. So I want to bring up like an interesting topic today, talking about
Not
freedom.
yet, but
Oh yeah? Oh, okay. That's strange. Yeah, I wasn't sharing. I was or was not. Wait, just what is happening here? Share? Oh, that's why. It's because it's in the shared. I was sharing the sound. Now I need to go into shared screen. Okay. So let me know if there's an echo as well. I'm hearing
yes,
my
I
own
can hear
voice.
an echo.
There's an
Yes.
echo? Okay. I hate it. Is it gone? Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, so freedom. And what I wanted to go into today was the concept of free will. And this should be interesting to think about when we think about correction facilities, jails, prisons, and we talk about people deprived of liberty, like free will. There's a long debate that's been there for a while. It's the debate between free will and determinism. And I feel if we're going to go into the philosophical underpinnings of the red dimension, the red domain, these two would come up if you had like eons to think about what is the philosophy, what is the ethos, what is the spirit, the guiding spirit in the red, like how do we go deep red, right? So I want to explain or go into like what is there. In terms of innerdance, we could look at these, like free will would be what? Like what is free will anyway? The freedom to choose, the freedom to act, the freedom to decide from one's own wisdom, one's own capacities. It's maybe to do with power, with sometimes with wealth. Like a lot of people are into financial capacity, because when you have a lot of money, you tend to be able to have more freedom somehow, but it should be like a lot more than that. Sometimes the more resources you have, the more you actually get trapped. Many people I know who have like oodles of money, they don't act like they're free. So there's like, what is true wealth that is synonymous with true freedom somehow? Innerdance talks deeply about that. Determinism would be an interesting thing. They don't normally need to go against each other. In philosophy, there are what you might call compatibilism and non-compatibilism, whereby free will can go hand in hand with determinism. It could go hand in hand, but there are many thinkers that says no, that actually doesn't meet. So it depends on where you are coming from. What is your idea on free will and determinism? Determinism would be like things are happening, why? Like for a reason. One word that can go along with that, it's not always in equilibrium, but causality would be a form of determinism. Like what determines the day? What determines what happens to your behavior? So when you take up, like for example, an issue called addiction, for an addict, is there freedom, right? Is there freedom to act? Is there freedom to choose? Like one favorable definition, I think, that I resonate with in free will is the freedom to say yes or no, the freedom to act, or the freedom to refrain. And for me, there actually is greater freedom in saying no. When you think about addiction, a lot of people aren't free when they are constantly saying yes, and that yes is not really coming from what we might call free will. Like where does the will come from? The will to like whatever you decide to do, to get into, where to be, and so on and so forth. So these two together, like free will and determinism, are definitely interesting to think about. And one probably needs to have some kind of guiding philosophy in order to hold people's processes. Like, where are you there? Like, what do you believe in? What is your philosophy on determinism? Like, what is making things happen? What is the causation? What is causality? In the coursework we are having together, we speak a lot about, let's say, emotions. There's the amygdala. There's the body's way of moving on its own, and certainly that is relevant in terms of something like inner dance. There is that which thinks or pays attention. Like, where do you direct your perceptions towards? What are your judgments? And then lastly, about memory, like, does memory cause what you think about and how your body moves? But then we talked about the amygdala hijack. Your emotions actually direct what you are remembering, and based on how you're feeling, is that how it's how your thoughts are being directed, and are those influencing your movements? So somehow in the spiritual space, causality is a very, very interesting thing. We've spoken quite a bit about retrocausality, and this call will more or less introduce us to a deep orange. A deep orange. Before we go too deep into the orange, and the orange is the deep domain, that is going to be 2 weeks later. let's maybe deconstruct first. What is causation to you? How do you see causality? Is that important to think about? Like, what is causing your mood? What is causing your kundalini, if you like to use that to call your movements? What is causing your thoughts? Are you truly free? And if you are, how much autonomy really is there? Is there really such a thing as free will? There are philosophical, scientific, and spiritual ways to approach this, and these actually would do battle. There is an internal war without you knowing about it, that sometimes when you think about the notion of like surrender, like if this is something you're mastering for yourself, and yet this is something you're participating in a group space, surrendering to others. Let's say you're holding space. This is definitely what you're giving other people, like surrender to what it is that determines, that is much, much bigger than you, as opposed to free will, which in some sense could talk about like autonomy. And we have to talk about autonomy always in inner dance because of the autonomic nervous system, but also the sense of control, right? Like, how much are we in control? So inner dance is what to you? Is it like gaining control of your life? But definitely most people would say it's not about that. It's like like let go, surrender. So this is confusing, like in a way. And so we might find some kind of compatibilism here. We might conjoin the philosophers, the deep thinkers who think about such matters, that maybe this doesn't need to fight. And then if we step back far enough, let's say, find a perspective that is far enough, this might just become like a one thing, like a one point. But before that, we would dissect these and think about these quite a bit. Now, there is still the mind-body problem here somehow. Like mind is often much, much more associated with free will. Like when we are thinking as a being and we're acting out of our persona, even our ego, then we are acting out of our, hopefully, like our free will, that we are not being influenced by other people, like the mother, the father, the companies, the government, the religion, and so on and so forth. And when we think about the body, then we think about how science might definitely be coming from a deterministic perspective, even a reductive worldview. And reductionism, I think about now because the principle I suggest within the red is less is more. Could be more is less, could be more is more, less is more. Reductivism is also in many ways a determinism and is also a materialism. And when you look at science that is quite materialist in essence, to see it is to believe it. You need to give a proof of concept. You need the data. The philosophy that we study in the red would be empiricism. And there might be a spiritual empiricism later on. This is something maybe we don't need to avoid if we do live in the world. There could be an energy-based empiricism. We don't know yet what that would look like. Let's just keep journeying to that. But empiricism would for me be the height of determinism. Empiricism is and how we embody the mind, and we work through the sensible world. When you study the philosophers that believe in free will, they don't really honor or prioritize the sensible world. Like the mind transcends the body, which is, kind of a Buddhist or a Platonic mindset, maybe all the way to a Kantian or a Heideggerian worldview, as opposed to a more medical perspective. Like we are not here to create a war. There's already too many wars happening. We're here to solve the mind-body problem. And inner dance belongs to both. Inner dance is not just about the mind. It's not just about the body. It's the space in between. This is the dance, probably. It's moving. It's the energy wave in between the body. So that is why we would take these up. Like I would love for you to explore free will and determinism as concepts. So like, for example, what does this have to do with the work that we do? Like, what is your concept of God? God, for many, up until now, would be the ultimate determinist, right? So if you are holding space and you are reading the room, you're reading the bodies, these belief systems matter. Like, how do people see things? Like a lot of people in the New Age and the spiritual awakening movements, God as a concept is not an exteriority. It's becoming more of like this is not outside of us, it's inside of us. So depending on how you hold belief structures around this kind of determinism, this will influence how you touch people. This will influence how you speak to the room. This will influence the whole energetic field, right? So then when you think about free will, what does that have to do with God, right? There has to be some kind of transition space, so that ego or mind could still coexist with a God space, but free will needs to be a philosophical construct. Free will is one of the oldest philosophical questions out there. That's why I bring it up now. Okay. So like this really just keeps going deeper and deeper. Like all these concepts, like how do you see, let's say this is the whole, and there are all of these events, people, places, and things like in your mind, body. Are they separate, or are they somehow interconnected? Are they one, despite that they are many? When you believe in a world that's separate, there will be some kind of randomness or arbitrariness, like in the way things are causal. Like one thing leads to another. In the worldview of interconnectedness and oneness, there might be what you might call pattern. Pattern would be an indigo dimension. And there might be not just a retrocausal space, there might be a multi-causal space. And when I bring this up, these are playlisting elements. Like there are causal playlisting styles, like one at a time. This one goes to another. Then, yeah, we could bring up like words, touch. So I think what Caroline is speaking about would be to be able to touch people from a retrocausal or multi-causal mode where people are feeling touched, but that which touches them is what? Like, what is that in representation? It's not Caroline who's touching. She has great care in bringing clarity on like who is actually, or even the touch is a being. Like, is it spirit that's touching? Is it context? Is it So bringing up addiction and bringing up the deprivation of liberty, all of these start to bring to create really deep contexts that would be applicable wherever you are, because addiction and imprisonment is everywhere. Another thing to bring up probably would be power. Power is very relevant in terms of free will, like, and determinism, like who holds the power. And depending on how you hold bodies, really what we have been so careful about in this coursework, this 12-month study process, is many facilitators are getting trainings to help them to believe that I am the one holding the space. I am the healer, the teacher. I am the one healing you. I am facilitating you. I'm holding you. I am basically causing you, and I am determining you. And maybe that's okay in some contexts. It's just that maybe, possibly, like this is the root cause of the addiction and the enslavement unto itself, the imprisonment. Like maybe this is that which is not free. So when we think about the power dynamic, the power issues, the levels of competition that had led to levels of consumption, and maybe confusion, to find clarity, coming into a philosophy of what is free will today and what is determinism today in an inner dance sort of age, whatever that means, what do we call this age anyway? Like, to think about addiction, I would call it maybe the age of consumption. Think about dopamine, it would be the age of indulgence. And we would take social media to task with that, to take responsibility for how much people are into validation from the outside. Indulgence would be about seeking pleasure. And there are a lot of people in addiction programs and in jails because of pleasure seeking and also pain avoiding, either happening inside themselves, but also happening around them, that they have absorbed the pain avoiding and pleasure seeking tendencies in the world. And this is only bound to increase with the rise of the use of technology and the content that is carried by that technology, whether it be like pornography or games or image, narcissistic, like we're consuming anything that exists as an outside source of happiness and joy. And we are more or less reminding people everything you need is already inside. This is the vision statement of the red, like everything you need is already inside you. However way you are able to clarify this for people, not like the healer is outside you. I'm going to touch you now and you're going to be healed. However way we can make this clearer and clearer. This is the goal of the red. All right, so going back to the belief structure, what are we going for? What is the worldview that we are hoping to clarify? I want to share a particular audio for the orange. And before that, like at least like we can look at the transcript of Ash, this lawyer from Malaysia who had an inner dance experience. And I've shared this particular experience over the years, maybe since 2016. This has been part and parcel of all the inner dance trainings that are real trainings. So something, let me stop that so you're not reading it. Something happened there in that one space in an apartment in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Maybe 8 years ago. So I bring up Ash. Ash is one of the most trusting persons I have ever met, and I know a lot of trusting persons. Trusting persons believe that everything's happening for a reason. You cannot bother a trusting person. There's no judgment. There's no resistance. She doesn't get angry at anyone. There is no projection in a trusting person. A fully trusting person is absorbing the universe. There's pure receptivity. There is no projection. And I never felt any projection in Ash. So I trusted her inner dance, and we would try to do these one-on-one journeys or whatnot. So something very strange happened then and there. Like as soon as she lay down, something weird happened. Okay, so think about this weird notion where you're thinking about something, and as soon as you think about it, you would say it. Normally, that's how it works. When you're thinking about it, you're intending it, then you would say it. What would it be like if, as soon as you're thinking it, something happens outside that expresses what you're thinking? So even at the moment, at the exact moment you want to say it, it's expressing itself outside. Would that not be weird? That there is no separation between what's inside and outside. This is exactly what happened between me and Ash. Suddenly, as soon as she would want to say something, I'm saying it. I can't describe what it was like, but everything she wanted to say, I was saying. And so that's what she meant when she said it was so weird. I want this to speak from the first moment. It's as though you were the voice of my ego. Okay, so that created a collapse of the ego that she had no other choice but to become the universe and to observe herself as the universe. So this is what she spoke. This is for me the belief structure. It's conditioned already before I even know it's there. When I was speaking, it was so clear. It's the same moment. This is kind of abstract, but this is what it is. And when she says, when I was speaking, I was the one speaking. So she was speaking, but I was speaking. So this would be I guess the penultimate, like, space where determinism meets free will. There is no other space where free will and determinism will meet. This is called omnicausality, omnicentrism. Every single thing in the universe is causing each other. Like, I don't have power over you more than you have power over me. And that is the true inner dance. If it's still pretty much like, no, I'm powerful and look at me doing all these things to your body that makes these things happen, that is not inner dance. That's something else altogether. Go ahead and give that another name. But if it was an inner dance, it would pretty much be an omnicentrism, an omnicausation. Stop share just to make sure the screen gets shared still. So I think that's what we're going for. That brings us back somehow into some kind of violet space. So we would still probably start with, so let's go back to causality then, or determinism. For now, let's talk about causality. What is healing? And thank you so much, Irene and Carolyn. There's something quite clear already in your words as to how to guide us into holding. What is the point? What is the point in all this? What are we doing for others? What are we doing for ourselves? This is quite violet, and there is red in the violet anyway, when you look at the color wheel. There are stages, there are these journey states that needs to happen. And what people I think are gaining, people are trusting, yes, trusting the space holder so that they can trust who? So it could be the self. This is where we start. Self what, right? I am, for now, causing my addiction. I am causing my behavior. I am causing my my reality. I'm constructing my world. And for those who are in victim spaces, what Irene was referring so profoundly to as what is response ability? What is the ability to respond? What ability? When do we know people are doing the work? You know, like they're not just coping, they're not avoiding, they're not projecting, but they are taking ownership. How do we know that? So causality can start with that, and that is super beautiful. Like I am causing all of this. I realize that now that I can own what I thought was something I could blame on others, that I could throw towards it. It's your fault. That, you know, like here is a starting point. Here is a point in between, you know, or maybe point in the middle of a circle. I am doing this. I am responsible. So let's look at what would be more relatable to the red. And for me, red and yellow are a little bit like intertwined and overlapping here. No, I just turned on the flashlight. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, over here, let's look at the core self-evaluations. I always found this quite beautiful to look into in regards to the free will deterministic debate. Firstly, like locus of control, this is one of the core self-evaluations. A core self-evaluation represents a stable or stability in your persona, which encompasses how do you see yourself? Like, how do you answer the question, like, who are you? So the locus of control would be that which indicates a tendency to, you know, like, who's controlling? What's the center of control? Is it internal, which is inside? Do you have a strong or weak internal locus, or do you have a strong or weak external locus of control? So it says here, those with an internal locus of control, a strong one, are more likely to be owning up to their work, satisfied with their job, like I can own it, and life in general, because they are in control. They are not victims. They're not, you know, they're not giving power away to others. The other two that I would bring up, let's skip neuroticism for now, would be self-efficacy and self-esteem. Let's go back to the iPad. I don't like reading Wikipedia entries. We can sacrifice these later on. Self-efficacy would definitely be a huge thing in regards to free will, and then there is self-esteem. So self-efficacy would be one's belief in one's ability to act. Simply put, like, I can do it. I am powerful enough to be able to do it. Self-esteem would be one's perception or ability to respect, or let's say value, oneself. Oops. And it's actually very, very interesting because a lot of people who have high self-efficacy might often come from low self-esteem. Like a lot of people who are good doers, I can do it. I'm really good at doing it. It's because they don't love themselves. What do we like doers and like maybe lovers. I don't know. So yeah, a lot of people are really good at proving that they can do it, that they're good actors. They can really rise high up in the career path, in the corporate ladder. They can climb really, really high. And they work really hard because they have something to prove, because they don't love themselves. So that's where we still would maybe read the room. Let's say it's the addiction program room or the prison room. Like how much do people like respect themselves? Like this self-esteem thing would definitely be quite low. We don't want to generalize, but generally it would be low in an addiction clinic. It would also be low in prison, primarily because people are being judged all the time. That, you know, like there's shame, a lot of shame. Shame is like, I am a bad person. There's a lot of guilt. Guilt is like, you did the wrong thing. You're a bad person. I'm bad. I'm bad. And then I did something wrong. So that's the ongoing story. So what are we actually healing? As a parent, my very, very simple parenting practice is to give my children a good hug. And that's going to happen maybe 100 times a day when I'm with them. And I'm going to keep saying it again and again, like, you're a good kid. You're an amazing kid. You are such a good kid. Who is the best kid here in this room? Who is the best baby in the universe? And speaking that to a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 14-year-old who are running around the house like all the time. And I can see what it does to their bodies. And over here, it's like, yeah, it's okay. Whatever you did, that's probably like okay, right? Um, so when Carolyn speaks about like what is that doing when I am like holding people's bodies? What am I communicating? What am I actually transmitting? And in inner dance, because we don't use that word so much, what is the resonance that I hold in the room that mirrors something that wasn't really spoken as clearly, that led to like these stories that I am not enough, I am small, I am, you know. So it you can speak words, you can say these things, right? Of course, but you don't have to, because sometimes the nonverbal can be a lot more effective. This can happen through even the music. This can happen through your touch. And what Carolyn is saying is that maybe this is the most effective communicator that brings about the maybe self-esteem, maybe wait, let's clean this up. Yeah. Go there. I think if we sacrifice this would be self-love, could still be the green. Could still separate that. And then in the orange, it could be self-creation or self-birthing. And then in the red, it could be self-sustaining, self-sustainability. All of these go hand in hand. Like in the violet, it could be integration, self-integration. And in the indigo, it would be self-knowledge. This is what you would ask in the long term. Is it possible to respect yourself if you don't love yourself? Would it be possible to evolve, to act, to self-act without like all those? Would it be possible to become whole without actually knowing who you are? And would it, you know, like it's like all these things, they all go together. It's a mandala of bringing that point into wholeness with all the other points intact, and then you would be ready to mirror that once that is ongoing already within you. Like I think that is a really good way of understanding what is healing. So once again, the word validation would be up and coming. What is the opposite of validation would be a kind of skepticism. Like, people don't know what to trust. They don't know what to believe in. Somehow we are looking for one space where everyone is valid. Every action, every day, every space is valid. Like everything is a part of God. And if we simply had a perspective where everything is happening for a reason, then all well and good. All right. So this is maybe a good way to think about what is at the roots of addiction and imprisonment. All right, so moving on, I think then we're kind of ready to go into addiction. So addiction is the red topic. It is the red topic, and that's going to bring up once again the drug of choice for this one. And we would be honest to ourselves that innerdance facilitators and other people using similar forms of energy are guilty of doping. Doping is okay. There are like good elements of doping, but there are unconscious and invisible and hidden processes at work. Now, addiction deals with two locations in the brain that are in fact sharing overlapping regions. One of those regions is called pleasure, and then the other region is called pain. And maybe a better way of situating these two is that they are part of some kind of balance. There's like a balancing effect. And the body is always trying to find a way to hold that balance. That balance in medical speak or science is called homeostasis. So the body is wise, the body is genius. And one of the value statements in the red is your body is amazing. So if you're dealing with not just issues with wealth and sustainability, but health, when the body is experiencing like, ouch, that down, disease, this is what you speak. The body has the amazing regenerative capacity to self-heal. So it doesn't matter if people are taking medicine or taking some homeopathic, anthroposophic, organic, nature-based medicine. If people don't believe that their body has the power to self-heal, it doesn't actually matter. There's really just still the same old story of reliance, and I need something from the outside. So that's one way of speaking. And what holds that statement in check is homeostasis unto itself. Now, dopamine is part of the homeostatic process. And there is something in us that it is a tendency of trying to tip the balance towards here and towards here. We are somehow, through long stages of evolution, seeking to experience pleasure as much as possible. Like in 24 hours, I hope to experience more of this one. And I hope in the 24 hours, I reduce like this one. So in addiction, pleasure and pain are actually quite present. And in the brain regions, whether it be in the somatosensory cortex, the cingulate cortex, the thalamus, we brought up in previous calls, the prefrontal cortex, and the insular cortex, this is where we experience pleasure and pain. So it's interesting that when this lights up, this actually also lights up. Like I was speaking to a teacher once whom I really, really love and respect, and she told me once that an orgasm high is actually pleasure and pain. For a lot of people, they would really just like go against that. It's definitely this one, but somehow this kind of makes sense. Maybe it's pain turning into pleasure. And what is interesting is this is kind of hard to maintain anyway. So maybe it's a nice and good thing to have once in a while. But can you imagine if you had an orgasm nonstop the whole day, and then that just stretches out to the whole week of the whole year? It probably wouldn't be called an orgasm anymore. We want to ask that question. Is it possible to have an orgasm the whole day? Is it possible to have an orgasm the whole year? The answer is no. In the 1970s, there's work by Richard Solomon and John Corbett that talked about the opponent process theory. The opponent process theory. And what does that say? It basically speaks this very, very simple notion that the longer you prolong or repeat pleasure, the more you will actually invite the opposite. Okay. Let's look at the word hedonism, because this might actually already be starting in the spiritual process, in the energy work. The hedonism is this tendency to just keep leading a pleasurable life, like to just go into pleasure seeking the whole day. Like, this is the point of life, that I am just always going to seek pleasure. But according to the opponent process theory, the more you experience pleasure, there's something that is on its way, and this is bound to come in. And the more and more you try to experience more and more pleasure, the more this just gets more. So look into the historicities of people experiencing pain. There would be something there that is both pain avoiding and pleasure seeking, that would have its own color, have its own texture that's unique to the person. So were you to go into the laddering of, okay, what is the fear that is hiding beneath the emotion, that is hiding beneath the judgment that is being held by the illusion? Okay, because illusions do sponsor judgments, and judgments sponsor emotions, and emotions become fear, and then that starts to affect metabolism and immunity in the body. It becomes all embodied. So if you wanted to heal someone, what does it really mean to heal someone? Maybe at the bottom, if you're in the red, it would be like a sickness. If you wanted to heal a sickness, you need to look at what's holding that, which is that. Like, what are they seeing? What is the belief structure that led to this? And on the way to that, there are all of these things. It's super fun, actually. Like, for me, to heal someone is twofold. It is to name the fear, especially, like, what are you afraid of? And at the same time, it's to name the highest. What is the highest observation? What is the most beautiful? What is the most transformative? You need to keep both in check. Like, be honest, like, what are you afraid of? Yet, where are you headed with this? What is your highest potential? You know, you cannot avoid this. You cannot escape or bypass. Yet, you can't just keep repeating the trauma work. You know, you can't just keep re-traumatizing and cycling around. Like, yes, I'm afraid, but then, what is your passion? What is your love? For me, that is what it truly means to heal, and to move from, let's say, a physical space all the way to what is consciousness? You know, what is the field? So I think this is quite interesting, the opponent process theory, that people have to pay, that there is a cost. So take like exercise, for example. Exercise is painful. When you study the science of exercise, when you do exercise, there's some kind of cell death that does happen to exercise. There toxins that are released when one is exercising, but at the same time, exercise would heal the body. So that's just one example of there is pleasure that would come from that pain. And you know how I always play with words, and there's always the heart in the words, like the heart of the earth, the heart of life. Already, always you would see these interesting truths hiding in the words. So what is at the heart of pain? It's not just like artificial intelligence. There's authentic intelligence. There is some kind of wisdom. There is insight hiding in the pain. The pain is an email. Pain is a text message. It's like a ping. It's saying something. It's a transmission, if you will. It's trying to say something, and if we don't listen to the pain, then we wouldn't be able to read the email. So one thing to maybe stay in constant communication with when you are dealing with frameworks to assist the sessions you're holding, the trainings you're activating, is the fear avoidance cycle by Robert Latham. The more you feel this, you would the more this is there, the more you'd experience it, the more you'd be afraid of it, the more you would avoid whatever is causing it, the more you stop using the part of your body, or the more you emote the energy of this, and then the more it's going to become painful. And unless you're able to move into the space of no fear, then there would be no confrontation. I like to maybe use the word observation in inner dance. It doesn't always need to be like this heavy word. And then a true recovery would occur. And this is not a spiritual framing. This is in medicine. Like even doctors are realizing that unless people look at the source of the pain, I'm not telling you to avoid pain. I'm telling you maybe more to see it for what it is. And maybe pain would be in the red, as in indigo, people are also in what is called information avoidance. And I'm just noticing this now. The acronym is IA, which is the opposite of AI. So maybe that's the opposite of authentic intelligence. There are people who pay a lot for information. They're looking for information. They're striving for information. You are one of them because you are here. But there are a lot of people who have cancer, have depressions. They don't actually want to see it. So let's say you have cancer and the information would tell you you need to eat better, but your emotions say, no, I really want to eat that because I feel like it. So then that's definitely like an addiction, and people will avoid reading or watching documentaries that talk about, so this might be the indigo to the red. This would be the red, and this would be the indigo. They're holding each other, are they not? And so maybe the more you see, the more you embody what you know. Sorry, that looks like Mother Kali. Already put the right. The knowing and the being are one and the same, and fear operates in these two systems. So this will make us very, very careful that if we are holding inner dance activities that are teaching people to go into a hedonistic lifestyle. I keep going back to that session because I'm experiencing a lot of bliss. So whenever I hear feedbacks from, I don't do sessions anymore. So what I do is I train people who would train or facilitate. And when people are saying, I am suffering, it actually makes me happier sometimes. Oh, yes, amazing. And then the facilitators just get confused. Like, what do you mean? They're not okay. They're not feeling good. And I would go like, good. They're because they're looking at it. They're actually looking at it. And there are many findings, in fact, that reveal that people who are allowing the pain, this is where pleasure would eventually like come through. Because here in drug speak, tolerance, and we've spoken quite a bit about this in the past, that's it. You know, the more you take a certain drug, that drug is not gonna work when there's repeated exposure to the same pleasure stimulus. The more you keep experiencing the pleasure stimuli, again and again, you keep going to the same session again and again, maybe a year later, then you'll experience that. But then there was a memory, and that's what dopamine does. Dopamine tries to reenact that. Dopamine remembered, dopamine remembered like this. But then a year later or 2 years later, the kind of inner dance that you're having is this. Hedonism for the pleasure of its own sake leads to what's called anhedonia, which is the inability to enjoy pleasure of any kind. The inability to experience. Can you imagine like this happening to people? This is where we don't just create like addicts, we then create depression. Yet, you know, people are like doing spiritual things, but how do you know that people will not eventually just get into this space where they can't just go outside anymore on a bright sunny day to enjoy the sun, to take a nice swim? You know, like drug addicts feel miserable when they're not taking the drug. So what happens when you stop taking the drug? There will be withdrawal symptoms, as is being described by Irene, that when you are used to like blissing out in an unnatural way, you're doping in an unnatural way. When the body then goes back into the homeostatic balancing, when the balance tips, then what will be revealed would be anxiety. These are the withdrawal symptoms, right? Whenever you stop taking that, doesn't need to be a drug. It could be a behavior. It could be something. There would be insomnia, and then there would be dysphoria, what I just spoke. And so that's why people don't stop taking the drug, or when they stop taking the drug, that's why there would be some kind of relapse. There would be a relapse, especially what in science they call dysphoria-driven relapse. It's because there are these withdrawal symptoms. And then we judge the drug addict, like you're just wanting to experience pleasure. But no, we don't judge the sufferer. We're seeing that, oh, it's because they are in pain. It's because they are trying to alleviate the pain. So when you treat someone with depression who walks into your room, or anxiety or chronic pain, you have to expect that the balance will, in their natural state, will normally tip towards like here. So pain would be maybe the dominant, and pleasure would be the, but then when you do hold the process, sorry, this should be small. When you do hold the process, because there's this pain buildup, the tendency is for this to, in fact, naturally rise up, and pain to diminish because of the homeostatic effect. That's what is happening in the work of Irene right now, and I'm glad that Carolyn just mentioned that the work in prisons is actually still work in addiction. So that's really going to be amazing. So I think to review some of the things that we have brought up in the previous months that might be more or less like relevant here. going back to the issue or the concept of determinism or causality, because we're bringing up a drug like the autonomic nervous system is something we have studied, the ANS. Remember we talked about the hypothalamus and the limbic system, which is the amygdala, which is about emotions. And we also spoke about the prefrontal cortex being that which hopes to mediate the emotional body, the PFC, prefrontal cortex. That these are more or less determining each other. In innerdance, we would study the nucleus accumbens, or let's say the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is, with the nucleus accumbens, is very much related to movement or the dance of the body, the dance of life. Okay, so emotions, this would be more regulation of the dualism of the body, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And then this would be attention. And then let's add here the hippocampus, which would be memory. So I think the issue on determinism, let's move this over here. The issue in determinism from an embodied perspective would be like, who causes who? Would it be like your so-called traumas, your memories, causing how your body is shaping itself, how it's positioning itself in the space, or how you're feeling, or how you're either balancing or imbalancing? How are you regulating, and what are you thinking about? Okay, so where do your thoughts come from in relation to what you're remembering? And a lot of these are embodied. So I guess we have to contend with the fact that the will is somehow embodied. Like for us to get a sense of ancient philosophy and where it is now, we know too much about the brain. We know too much about the nervous system. And we understand that there's some kind of determinism prior to us becoming aware of something that is already at work before we even know it. Let me screen to you like a particular video I find important. It's from a, wait, let me make sure that I'm sharing the sound. I am sharing the sound. Okay, so this particular documentary is available. You have to pay for it if you want to rent it. It's only $2, but it will help you a lot in thinking about free will and determinism. So there's this very seminal experiment conducted by Benjamin Libet, and it was in 1983. And it rocked the world of science. It helped us to understand that there is this kind of lag between action and intention. So let's just watch this, because this could help us facilitate a discussion afterwards on what this could mean to innerdance.
The classic study was the Benjamin Libet study, which was done in 1983, which basically showed that you had about 350 milliseconds before a person was even consciously aware of their intention to make an action. And so that sort of concept has been looked at with more modern technology.
The way they do it is they give people 2 buttons to press. They have a screen that the person looks at that allows them to denote what time they feel that they consciously decided which button they'll press.
And they were told that whenever they had the will or desire to push this button, to just record when it occurred on the clock. And what they found is about 200 milliseconds prior to pushing the button, individuals become aware of an intention to push the button.
You would see this, what he called a readiness potential, which is like a sort of building up of brain activation about 350 milliseconds before they feel the intention to move. And then it takes about another 200 milliseconds to actually make the movement.
And what it indicated to some is that the brain has already begun the process that will ultimately lead to the action before the individual has decided to push the button.
They can actually read the scan, and before the person realizes they're consciously aware of which button they'll press, they'll know which button they press with a certain degree of probability that's higher than chance, basically.
Sorry, it's still going on in my screen. Didn't press pause. Okay, so that sort of experiment has emboldened scientists and philosophers to take this really strong stand that there is no such thing as this, that there is no such thing as free will. Because when you think about this, and this is interesting from an innerdance perspective, let's say this is the buildup of the intention. And then as you could see, like action was here. And awareness of intention was here. And yet, like you are, before you did it, before you acted, you already, you somehow unconsciously were already intending, you were acting upon it way before. So from a deep story space, which is an innerdance space, how far back, I mean, isn't that what it is? Like, how far back does this go? It's like this kind of causality. It's like, what happened that happened that happened that happened that happened? Like, where did it begin? You know, maybe from the Big Bang, it all just kept happening that led to that moment. And it's not just these milliseconds before the action took place. What led to that, the ultimate causality, is like really like super duper old, that we might have super separated from. And what is that point? What is that space really? And that is what would bring us into a retro or even a multi-causality. I don't actually believe that this invalidates free will, right? I feel that this, in fact, brings about an understanding of both causality and intention. And if you listen to that dialogue with Ash, we will share it before the orange, maybe by next week. She speaks about intention. And a lot of people like ask, what do you mean by intention? She said, it's the intention, the original intention, the intention to move, that moves all things. Like, if it's not the ego intending, then there is still kind of a will, like it will, not you will, not I will, but it, what it is willing. So there is still will, and there is still a lot of freedom. It's just that we live in a sequential reality, which is formulated or based on time. And if you escaped time or transcended time, and when you work with the vertical axis, not just the horizontal, okay, this is the grid. When you find a way to deal with the multi-causal, not just the 1.1 thing at a time, but when you access the all at once, there is still something symbolic about that which rises up, that which is constantly building up. So when we do go into the orange, we will invoke the blue. There is still selection and combination that makes what we are speaking about here practical. Like, how do you, in fact, apply this to playlisting? when you playlist, like how much are you selecting from the space and how much are you bringing into combination? I'm not sure how much to go into it. I actually prepared my Ableton, but maybe that's not really relevant, and I'm not even sure if it's gonna work. But I do want to bring up like a playlist that I'm like not so sure about. It scares me. I created it, but I'm not actually sure. It's what do you call it? Let's go to Spotify. It's this one right here. And when I sent that out maybe a month or two ago, I gave it a warning. Don't use it while you're driving. It's a pretty irresponsible playlist. Another word I have for it is the heart attack. And let me show you what I mean. So what I do when I go into my workflow is I basically do what's called a sketch. For me, Ableton is like a sketchbook. And you know what a sketch is? It's like when you're trying to sketch something, let's say, you know, like the borders are not clear, the boundaries are not clear as the image starts to appear. So when I do something on Ableton, for example, working with my synthesizers, what I do is I just play, but then I would more or less like construct the wave based on my control of tempo, rhythm, or speed. So this would be like slower, and like this would be fast. So coincidentally, and I'm not sure if Sophie's with us right now, so I would like to invite her later on what made this particular playlist so weird. She said, that was really, really crazy, Pi. What did you do to that? So when I construct a playlist, I make a sketch, and I'm able to do that live so that I would maybe construct a, oopsie, like a 60-minute or 90-minute playlists. Usually I just do 60 minutes so people in the cities who are stuck to that, what they promise people, keep it within an hour. That's what I do. So Ableton allows me to change the tempo so that when I put other instruments there, like it would follow that tempo. That's what I mean about a sketch. I could keep going back to the program and it would keep following that tempo. So I would try to follow, let's say, the 12 stages, or let's say the 5 stages of sleep, non-REM 1 to REM towards N2. So there would be like a rising and falling. So what I did with this particular weird, crazy, irresponsible, I call it an irresponsible playlist, is when I make, for example, like a sleep playlist, it would be very gentle. I might rise up like this. And then usually a sleep playlist for me would end like that. So it's not to wake people up. I would raise up the vibration, hoping to invoke early onset of REM and also to expand REM, which is usually quite contracted during the early stages of the night. Now, if I know that people will be using a playlist system that will be live and people are not sleeping, but they're awake, then I would have control. If I wanted to bring diversity, then sometimes I would do this, or sometimes I could do this instead. The rising would be, it's really up to where I'm at the moment. And then I will look at it. I could like edit that in the long term. That's what the programs amazingly do. So this is what I did with the Biggest Small Things playlist. I basically started here. So I would measure these by BPM, or beats per minute. And to show you what that looks like, it would be here in Ableton Live. Like I would start out with maybe 20 or 30 plus BPM. 40 would be maybe my fastest already. So then when I press record, what happens is while it's recording here, it would construct a kind of timeline, and whatever I am doing, it would record that. It's not recording because I don't have this on. So let's say I have that on. So now let's say this is a drum, and I would be Actually, let's just construct something live, just so we're together. Let's see. All right, so let's create a sketch. Let me look for some drums. Okay, this is a drum. This is an app that constructs like a drum. Let's give it a test. Let me make sure you hear that. And you might just hear an echo. So I can make it go faster and slower. Okay, so let's go back to the screen. So that's more or less, sorry, let me just show you one thing quickly as to what is a sketch. So going back to Ableton, let me activate the automation mode. So this is my main sketch, like onto my main. This line right here is the tempo. So I can make adjustments here. I mean, I made adjustments and it recorded here. So if I apply any other instrument that has a rhythm or a tempo, it's going to follow that tempo. So you can see that when I change the tempo, it just changes that. So that could be like an hour long, and I can go back to this playlist and just construct out of the sketch. And this is relatable to the free will determinism conversation we're having right now. I'll explain what that means like later on. All right. Or maybe in another Zoom call. So the playlist that I constructed called Biggest Small Things was exactly that which I just showed you. Like I started out very slow. And then what I did was I started to raise up the vibration. And normally I would try to do this. But instead of doing that, what I did with that, and I don't know what I was thinking, was to just go straight up to 999 beats per minute, which is the limit. Like if I could go to 2000 or 5000, I wanted to see what would that do. And then to at least like have a like a really deep integration period, I at least gave it like a long integration space, like a quiet space. This is probably longer, or I don't know. I have to go listen to what that did, but I was scared of that. I was scared of putting that in public. And why was I not wanting to put it out? Because it was meant to bring people into an awareness of what that is. It's just that there's something interesting about the process, that the higher you go, the less it will be experienced as pain, because then you would transcend the frequencies that are recognizable as heart rhythms, or even circadian rhythms, or endocrine rhythms like cortisol and norepinephrine. It wouldn't rise up so much anymore because the fastness would become slow. So pain would like transform into something else altogether. I'm just bringing this up as an example of how to apply something to what's been talked about, so that to go beyond the dopamine tendencies that are more or less like trying to tip the balance between pain and pleasure, going past the recognizable rhythms that dopamine depends upon, then could lead to like modes of transcendence. So like Sophie used this yesterday, and I think this is the first time anyone dared to use it. So I told her, you are crazy. I don't know why he did that. And then it's because she didn't listen to it. And then she then just went up to me afterwards and said like, but then again, the Becca was the first one who used this, and she did have like an interesting set of feedbacks. And Sophie in Belgium just yesterday, it means like first time, like first session. Not Natalie first session. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that this came about, because I was scared that people would just have heart attacks and just run off somewhere, because it's a really harsh playlist. There were a whole bunch of people, she said, who couldn't express and really had a hard time coming back because they went quite deep. So these are, ways we can achieve feedback and study differences in the work, because I am recording the construction of these playlists, so I can actually look back at the sketch as to what things actually look like. So that's that. Let me see. Are you here, Carolyn? I mean, Sophie? I don't think she is. I brought up the playlisting example as this one example of how innerdance breaks the addiction cycle and the still need my notebook. How it breaks the addiction cycle and the imprisonment space. It has something to do with the dimension that we're in. That basically we are working within a line of time, what some people might call a timeline. And we're basically moving into another dimensionality, which holds like a lot more space-time continuity. And when we are working within the current dimensionality, selection happens in space. It's like what are you selecting from? And then how are you combining that which you are choosing? Like we're operating on a three-dimensional space. And when we operate in maybe, I don't know if you know the figure, the tesseract, which is also in many ways like the hypercube, which is the fourth dimension unraveled. This is where we're headed. This is the awareness that is coming to us. We're not actually going there. We're just becoming aware of something that's always there. It's called a hypercube or the tesseract. Selection and combination is much, much more retrocausal and multi-causal, like in that space. And in that, there is something that is not very deterministic from a three-dimensional point of view, but there is also like a greater determinism, what I was calling as a multi-causality or a collaborative omni-causality or omnicentrism, that is partly where we came from and partly where we are coming back to. So in the previous call, we spoke a lot about like trust, that when you're operating from trust, this is kind of how logic works. It's like you put one thing after another and it's supposed to be in a certain order. Your ducks need to be lined up in a row. Yet when you go into the space of what seems like chaos and disorder, and a lot of people are afraid of inner dance because of inner dance's tendency to get people to lose control. There is some higher locus of control that comes from a really old intention. Remember the video that I shared with you where the action, we become aware of it here, but the actual action is intended like way back from a really old space. When you draw from there, there's basically not a point, but an infinity. Like this is like the universe somehow. I wish I could zoom in a lot more. There's infinity there. So for a lot of space holders, you would think that you're just making things up, that what you're doing are random actions, random words, random music, but in fact, there is some kind of predetermination. And predetermination is a little bit confusing. It means that I don't have free will, primarily because this was written before I came here. I am a victim of fatalism, of fate. I'm not creating my own life. But then that which is the universe is you. And you are God, you are goddess. And if you are also determining yourself, if you're able to come from that dimension, and there is no separation between your idea of that which creates and that which is created, anything that you do is actually perfect. There's something in that randomness that cannot make mistakes, and you would have to wait for it in order to allow the patterns to look like what the whole would look like, rather than just a linear succession of parts. It would look like the whole. Now, where this would help people in addiction and prison and psychiatric institutions and jails and whatnot is what this illusion brings about. The illusion of linearity and sequentiality is that when you live in time, what you cannot change is what has been, what has come to pass. In a retrocausal universe, which would be not maybe predetermined, but omnidetermined, where every single possible reality coexists with what is happening now. A lot of people are in trauma because there is this belief that you cannot change the past. What you can change is the future. But there's something about the hypercube and the tesseract, the fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh dimension, where we realize that we are changing the past, that the past is just as malleable as the future. So when you are trusting and when there's the randomness at work, there is a reason why people would go back to the childhood memory, to all those moments that were stored in the body. And what is stored in the body is causing people this awareness that comes later. A lot of the autonomic nervous system is storing the memories and the emotions, and body movements were like part of the storage mechanism. Now, going back to the subject of free will, then, I mean, just to close this really well, the free will is the ability to act or to refrain. And what I like about this is addiction is more or less like going into action. You know, I want to take that drug. I want to just keep doing it. And a lot of that, in fact, is a reaction. So that rather than being a creative being, we are, no, let's instead, rather than like creating, we are doing this, reacting. And then let's just take that out. We're reactive beings, and we're not creative beings. Actually, if I just did that, then it would be exactly the same letters, just moving them into different spaces. We think that we are creating, but we're actually reacting. So I think what that scientific experiment is speaking is that free will is not really free, because we are like reacting to a past process. And unless we come into some cleansing, all these findings in inner dances seems to bring people into the baby stage, the tabula rasa, the clean slate, the fresh page, the white sheet. We will not really be in the act of creation. We are in reaction. So free will might, in fact, be more the limitation. And a lot of people don't like this. Like when you go into the red, it's about like wealth creation, it's about abundance, about creating more and more. Your ability to say no to that which is pleasure seeking and pain avoiding will in fact be a greater freedom. It will in fact be a greater freedom. So we work through stages in the journey process. There would be, in the beginning, a lot of people who would want to go high. But in that brain state where we become babies, we need to then enact what happens in the 3 or 4-year-old or even 2-year-old, where there's a pruning of the omni-connectivity of the baby. There's too many connections in the baby's brain, and babies cannot speak words because there are too many connections. So there needs to be a pruning. So all this talk about boundaries around the self, around ideas, there has to be a healthy no to the constant yes that takes place in the beginning of the journey. There is like so much of the yes, but there are certain things that are not serving you, that are not activating your highest potential, that's not holding a kind of boundary. So for the addict, when you are holding the addict, the pleasure-seeking, pain-avoiding, changing the patterns somehow will entail what is called like growth. So that might maybe let's ask, what does it really mean to be free in an age of consumerism and indulgence and needing validation from the outside and needing to consume energy from the outside? I think in red, what would be really helpful for a lot of people to hear right now is, if you want to be rich, the fastest way to be rich is to be like simple. Because when we are in that cycle of not loving ourselves and then trying to do so much, this is never going to happen. But if you're okay with just being there, sitting on a park bench, breathing clean air, appreciating and having everything that you need, then we would have gotten the point of what it is that we're here for, right? Like that should be the point of the process. So in that, what I'm perceiving or hearing is there's a lot of people who are needing to access energy and the what we call the inner dance in different ways. And there's some confusion sometimes when people do lay down. They're like, I'm not getting the hit high, I'm not getting the high, I'm not actually feeling it. It's because they're looking for something, and I'm constantly building playlists right now that's not following the models that either they are used to because of how things are being held in certain spaces, and or it's like a really big mystery for me. So these new feedbacks have been really key and important for me to study this happening in people's bodies. All right, so I hope, sorry for like continuing, but I really wanted to close what's in the written in the notebook of my head space, my brain space. All right, so please help me, whoever just feels compelled to help me put stuff out there.
I mean, I'll be happy to share. Thank you for such deep aha moments for me with this. Pain has definitely had, I'm going to speak in past tense, had been taken over my life. And every time I thought it was gone and I separated from it, because for some reason I always even said out loud when I was in hospitals, that was actually quite often, and I would say, oh, don't worry, I have a very high tolerance for pain. Pain doesn't do anything to me. So I started integrating this language into my system to the point that it just became part of me. It's almost like my subconscious needed more of that. And for sure, in inner dance has been such an awakening for me. The last time I was in Maya, when I thought I was perfectly healthy and like, this is it, I'm at the end and had living the experience and everything, I literally ended up in the ER. And it was a day before we were finishing. So I was determined to come back to Maya and finish. I mean, I had done other programs there, but this one in particular, I wanted to come back. So at the ER, the doctor said to sign a thing, and she would only admit me if I would agree to 3 days of treatment. That's what I needed for whatever they said I had. And lo and behold, I told them, I'm going to sign because I know I need to be treated, but I'm not going to stay 3 days. I'm going to tell you that. No, you have to. You can't break the treatment. And long story short, I mean, there was this determination in me, and of course, being there all by myself, knowing that everything was going on at Maya. I don't know how it happened, but I literally got out of it. And also in this particular time when I thought, oh my gosh, this was such a perfect night to do inner dance. We were doing it outside. And I felt, I feel so good that the stars are so beautiful and the fire is so amazing. I'm skipping this session. I'm skipping it. I'm laying down because I'm free of pain. I got this. And then I actually excused myself. I said, you guys, I'm going to be putting my mat aside. I'm not part of it. And by far, it has been the session that has shook me to my core, that so much happened that they extended the session almost to 2 hours. Thank you for those that held my space back then. So the more I'm into inner dance, for me, is like the word that is popping up to my spirit in my head is like deconstruction. Because once I was obsessed with the taking notes, and at this point, I literally just want to close my eyes and hear these lectures, because life comes and you just deconstruct everything, even how we make these playlists. So pain, poke again. I spoke about it last time this weekend. And today I'm feeling so much better. And so it's a decision. And I'm going to speak in past tense, an addiction. And the more you do this work, not just with ourselves, but that we hold that space, knowing and understanding like the essence of these teachings, that you can't get it out of a book. You can't get it out of the notes. You can only get it out of living and observation. I'm just, everything that Pi you described today, I had the longest me time today. I was literally floating in the ocean. There was nobody. And I just was feeling everything, everyone. And I'm going to say it again. I'm getting it. I decide to believe that I'm getting it. And if I fall back down, I don't see it as a fallback anymore. And I just want to thank, because every one of you, when you speak, every one of you, when you write, everyone in your social media, it's that extra vitamin per se, or heartbeat, that you absorb, embrace, to literally have your cellular memory and your heart be impacted by all this. So this is home for me, like the whole thing about pain. And thank you, Pi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening and holding this space for me today.
Okay, so maybe I would share with my experience with this playlist called Deconstruction. So Vali was talking about that playlist. Yes, so I was listening this playlist with my son, maybe something about 2 weeks ago. And I didn't know that this playlist is so, for me, hard. I was feeling a lot of not pain, but I was afraid many times. I wanted to run away because it was so much going on in that playlist. And I was feeling really not not very sorry, what's happening here? Okay, I was feeling not safe. This was the feeling. But I stayed. My son was when we was talking after, my son told me that he was also wanted to run away. He was having a lot of fear inside of him, and he go out of the body. He go somewhere, and he was explaining me what he saw. This was the second time that he go out of the body, and I was like shocked because of that playlist. And but that fear was really interesting. Something is like I didn't want to. I was feeling a lot of fear, but I didn't want to stop. I was just saying, okay, I allow whatever happens. Maybe it should happen. And after that session, I was afraid of about my son also, because maybe I was thinking maybe this is too much for him. But he said that this playlist will be the best playlist for today. So my son has. We all have got the good intuition, but I feel that my son, he's got good feelings. So I trusted him, and we did that playlist. And right now, I'm thinking all the time about that playlist, because after this, I was feeling calm, really calm. And my son also was like, I couldn't imagine that something will gonna destroy my calmness. It was maybe 2-3 days like that, because before, when I was listening that playlist before this playlist, I was listening another one, and I was feeling a lot of anger all the time, yeah. And but I didn't stop. Okay, so I was thinking that, oh, maybe after that playlist, I will gonna feel a lot of anger. But this was very interesting that I feel very calm, like, oh, something stopped in my brain. And right now I'm feeling much better. Something is changing. I don't know why. I don't know what. But I'm really into this playlist right now. I really love this playlist, but I don't know why my life right now is cannot allow me to listening to playlist now after this day. I wanted to do some inner dance sessions for myself, but my life is like, no, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to take care of this, that. You don't have time. So I'm just going through that flow, but I'm very. This is very nice feeling that I'm more calm than I was. So I want to thank for this playlist. It was heavy, it was scary, but it was really good after the session.
I'm not sure if it was Gra or Caro. I think it was Gra. We will tell her.
I think, yeah, I did. I maybe Gra. I think Gra, but Gra was having this a través de tempo. but this construction, I don't know if somebody put name, but yes, it was, yeah. But actually, I'm scared to give that playlist to the people because I think that they were gonna scare a lot. What do you think, Pai, about that playlist?
I think, and we can hear from others, like sometimes it's the scary ones that do more, and it's always a matter of trust. We would get all of these different, let's look at the feedbacks that came in for that. I pulled them out. So this is the playlist. Beautiful, deeply emotional, fear and trust, but heart rate. So the heart rate improved. Death. So that's a bit the same or similar. Floating in the womb, blissful. So you never really know, right? Dreamy, 0 point. I don't speak Spanish. Amazing. Overwhelming would be intense, dying over and over again. So I guess if people, it would be your reading as to, are people ready for it or not? You have to listen to the space and your body. Here there was a tension or resistance, and she enjoyed the intensity. So you never know. Causality, you see where I'm getting at. Causality would be, what does the space need? Does it need the opposite? Does it need a sleep playlist? Or does it need, let me show you what happened to, Sophie is here, but then she could speak about this. But we were chatting yesterday, and she was doing a session for like in an asylum, and then there was this one boy whose nose is bleeding, and he was not getting out of it, but it took like a lot of trust. This is a playlist that she created. So this lasted for a while, and this is an institution. So there are people who were in charge of holding these children. The other child puked everything from his stomach. The other one urinated. So then the people holding the institution were quite happy anyway, and they say this does tend to happen. So I'm glad she was able to hold like so much trust. But the boy had blood all over his shirt. What would you do, right? But apparently it was like the most amazing thing. And now they're asking them, like Sandrine and Sophie, they're asking them to come back next week, and they're excited. So I think that speaks a lot about a literal red here, which is the shirt that you're wearing right now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Something interesting what you shared, Pai, about the video, and you shared about the retrocausality. I've been watching and looking into Penrose's theory of consciousness, and it's because it was kind of theory, and now we are going into the quantum mechanics more closer to take this theory serious and to look into this also. At the same time, for me, this how much it is connected with the red, because when you showed the graph and you pointed to point, say that's actually the intention. That's where the infinity is. It's kind of matching so much with Penrose's theory of where the consciousness is actually appears. Yeah, where we are talking about innerdance intention is. I find it super interesting how you connected actually from the video to this point, which is seems to be we are proving more and more into quantum physics. Yeah, that's something I want to share here. Yeah.
I think this is important because there is a disconnect between physics and metaphysics. Like what's lacking right now is a unitive explanation of what is happening in the world and what is happening to consciousness. So if there are neuroscientific explanations to what is also happening to atoms, to quarks, to electricity, to magnetism on Earth, then we're quite close to allowing the inside and the outside to meet. Because there are a lot of people going into spiritual work and they're very interested in the physics of sound, the physics of matter. You know, when they get really obsessed about frequency, what's the exact frequency? But that's not, in fact, really meeting with the current findings in the science of consciousness. So I think what you're saying is exciting. Yeah.
Well, I could say for me, it was just another time the realization when you made the opposite between the lovers and the doers. I know why I do so much, but it was good to see it again, why, and confronting. Yeah. And is it then that you can move from doing to loving by putting an intention on self-love, or just not putting anything at all, maybe? I don't know. Yeah.
I think this is the color that could be the most wounded in a lot of people. You know how it is that when we feel guilty when we're not doing anything, and most people, they feel good when they're getting things done. So when you just stop, and then when we rest, I think most people in the world right now, they don't want to get into that space. It's not just solitude. They want to keep on doing because that would lead to success. It would also mean, but it would mean we're covering over this need to be seen, to be heard, and also to be validated by our moms, and you know, protected by our dads, that we're actually good enough. So I feel the yellow chakra is going to be one of the more complex things to heal. And there's something about this, I think it's universal almost, like most people in the world are really in a space of doing. And especially at this time post-COVID, this is going to rise up, which means that there will be really a huge amount of addiction coming in. So the more we're able to look at the roots, the more we would like really get the point of what we're trying to hold here. So thank you for your honesty and your authenticity in expressing where you're coming from in this color. Thank you. Johanna, you unmuted. Did you wish to share, or you just yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say many things got triggered throughout listening to you. A lot of excitement too, from what is there and what is to uncover within me throughout the journey. So just feeling blessed, but triggered in certain areas, which is a good thing, I think, because it's witnessing my own humanity, witnessing my own nature, and from a very minuscule perspective, but simultaneously with a very broad vision. So yeah, that happened. So thank you for that gift.
Thank you, Johanna. Yeah, miss you. Thank you.
Excited to see you soon.
Oh yeah, November. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Like anyone else would like to share?
I'll say a couple of things on red. I think I was kind of half listening to this in the background. I'm packing up my stuff here at the minute, which is like another uprooting as I'm on my way to Spain for 3 months. And I think coming into Maya, I'm back in. I didn't know I was going to talk about this actually, so this is quite interesting. I had an idea of what I was going to say, and now I'm saying something else, but I'll just go with it and see if it works out. But yeah, coming into Maya, back in the day, it was all red. Like there was so much scarcity. I think I could feel and these issues of unrootedness and just not feeling secure at the root have been really huge for me. And it started to, I'm starting to see a convergence of all this stuff now as I've been just steadily working through it. And funnily enough, synchronistically, a friend who I hadn't seen for a long time, who went off to live in Thailand and then came back and has become an embodiment coach, he offered me a free session this morning. And so we went to the park to do this embodiment session. And the red came up quite strong. And he was saying, imagine this red cord going from your foot down into the earth. And just, if that works for you, see what it's like. And it did. It was like this artery opening up, coming from my foot down into the earth. And just like in embodiment coaching sessions, it's like just focus on your foot, as if on your feet, as if they were the only things in the world, and like put your attention there, and your knees and this lower half of the body. And before long, it felt like it had become kind of like a river, like a red river, in this lower half of me, and we went through steadily, and I could just feel all of these different areas of stuckness that kind of untangled as we just sat with them for a long, long time. And with my eyes closed, could see the colors and feel something very different that was happening in the body. And then I was very conscious of my walking afterwards, how I could feel myself carrying myself, because I was aware of my legs, and not usually being aware of what it's like to be in my legs, and then talking to people whilst being in my legs, and talking to them from my legs, and talking to them from my knees and from my feet, and having this full body interaction rather than just like I'm up here in concept land trying to communicate this. It was just like, it was much more resonance based model than it was transmission based model, which I think we talked about in the last call. Like, I'm not trying to tell something out there, I'm just receiving the full resonance from these people I'm interacting with, and it felt so real. Like, the conversations that I was having were suddenly able to drop into a depth that wasn't so present when I was just coming at it from, well, I'm going to try to figure out what you think and tell you what I think about that, and then we'll back and forth with these kind of structures. It was much more, I can feel you and you can feel me, and we're kind of descending down into this place where things are emerging that we didn't know that we knew, but that were always kind of there. And I think one of the things that really spoke to me in the last calls you were talking about was the monad and the holographic nature of that, how everything that I'm seeing out there is contained within here. Like, all of these little pieces, they're like projecting out into the world. And it reminded me of the end of Fight Club, where he's like, the gun's not in your hand, it's in my hand. And he suddenly looks down and the gun's in his hand, and it's like, it's that level of power in some sense, or that level of maybe power is not quite the right word, it's nearly the right word, but something like agency, of like, oh, I'm all of this, like, I'm bringing all of this, I'm not just a passive victim to it all. But it means staying with the feeling of it until it, and really understanding that it's here and that it's all coming from here on a body level, rather than just the knowledge of it or the conceptual level of it. So yeah, it feels like it's been much more flow. I remember saying to you, I think a while back, or when we met in Bali those years ago, and I said, I feel like I need to go back to the UK, and you kind of validated that. And it took me a few years to get around to it, as I circled and avoided it for a few more years just to land gently, you know. But then have spent the last 3 years here and descended into it. And it reminds me of this. I was listening to a podcast on it the other day. This guy, Boyd Varty, who was talking about this really, really intense experience that he had where he's a South African lion tracker. And so he's like a really interesting guy, got loads of really interesting things to talk about. But he talked about this experience he had where some people broke into his house and they tied up his wife and his mother and his family and were holding guns to their heads. And he said he could feel the adrenaline coursing through his body, you know, more than any experience he'd ever found before. And with each thing that happened, it was kind of ramping up. It was like just intolerable, the amount of adrenaline that he was feeling. And then at some point, it was like something woke up in all of them. It was almost like it was too much, that the ego just kind of burst open or burst. And while he was on his knees with this gun pointed to his head, he opened his eyes and stood up and said to the attackers, "You have to leave now." And he said it was like it woke up in them as well. It wasn't just him. It was a collective field breaking that was like, we see that we're the same thing. We see each other in ourselves. And why would we do this when we see that? And he just stood up and real calm and clarity said, it's time for you to leave now. And they agreed and got in the car and drove off. And it's like, he was saying after that, he had a lot of PTSD as he was trying to titrate and metabolize the experience that he had, and didn't really have like a spiritual framework or context to put it in. But that thing he was talking about is like he went so deep into the fear, into the life and death survival security thing, that he just kind of fell out the bottom of it and arrived in that one space. And it wasn't just him, it was the whole field of all of them together that just woke up in the middle of this incredibly intense situation. And over the years, as he's been titrating it and breaking it down, he was saying the cultures that recognize there's a time for a descent, the seasons and cycles to life, and sometimes there's a time for an ascent, and there's a time for descent, and there's a time to move up and down, and it's waves and cycles. And that's what it feels like it's been like for me the last 3 years, is a descent back into the earth of the UK. And it's uncomfortable. I say like nauseousness, but yeah, something really, really heavy. But it's helped me work through a lot of stuff now, where I just feel like I'm choosing to go somewhere rather than I'm going somewhere because I can't be here, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's a bit of a winding monologue about that. I'm going to be in Spain for the next 3 months, and that's going to be interesting and exciting. And it feels like this. It feels more like this than it does like this. So I'm happy about that. Yeah, good call. Thank you.
It's really good that Tom speaks now to help close the color. Like a lot of people came up with all these things that were coming out of inner dance, like inner food, inner yoga, inner breathing, and so on and so forth. Tom came up with this thing called inner warriorship, which is really, Tom was my teacher on like fighting. Like you don't need to just surrender. You need to learn to confront and to look at it. So for me, what is important about Tom in my inner dance framework is he's the one who wasn't pain avoiding. He was actually seeking pain because he was learning from it. And he was doing all these sorts of things. But the workshop that he was holding back then, I'm just jumping into the middle. Maybe you can watch like 2 or 3 minutes of this.
For the change, you are the
Wait, sorry, I don't know if this is working. Can you guys hear the sound? Yeah, I guess.
The flow, you're the evolutionary energy, and it's only this idea of magnetism that holds things rigid and keeps you in a skin that needs to be shed so that you can grow. And it's understandable why people go through this, because it can be scary. If you need to shed this skin and you need to grow, it's the skin that's causing you the discomfort, but you don't want to let it go because that's the system that you know. But really, it's the spiritual warriorship is about cultivating the trust and the strength to recognize when that is happening. There's a part of me that sees it really as a cleansing process. You know, it's like an emotional release, and there's another part of me that sees it like a dance, something very beautiful. If you see any person in their flow, in their element, it's beautiful to watch, because you see them performing a task without their mind being there to impose limits on them, and you can just see them flowing, and it's so inspirational to watch that, and it's so inspirational to feel that and be in that flow as well. But I think the reason that the mixed martial arts scene and a lot of fighting has exploded recently is just because people are looking for that emotional release. You know, they know that something's up. They know that they're not supposed to wake up on a Monday morning and hate going to work. They know that they're not separate. They know that they're not supposed to be competing for resources all over the planet. And so really, that I think that there is a big part of the population, and particularly now as the world is hitting this hockey stick curve, this exponential curve, there's a big part of the planet that is angry. They have these emotions that they need to release, and fighting is a very cleansing way of doing that. And I was always amazed by, I don't know if amazed is the right word, but I always felt so good at the end of a fight, because the pressure in that situation is so intense, and you go through it with one other person, and then at the end you're both in the ring and you've both left everything in the ring, and you're like the best of friends. You know, you have this kind of mutual respect for each other because you've been in that situation together and you've been through something, and it's kind of like going on a journey with someone. It's really compelling. And I found also the camaraderie in the sport is also very, very compelling. So I'll see guys come into the gym and they've got these huge egos. You know, they want to tear your feet off and stuff like that, but they don't have really any ability, and so they'll spend a few days being angry and unleashing, but they'll quickly realize that there's always a bigger dog there. And after a few months, you'll watch their ego just disintegrate and disappear, and they'll discover this humbleness or this humility in what they're doing, and it's a real kind of transformative thing. I like this metaphor that it's kind of like water running down a stream, that if water began to clump together and attach itself to everything around because it was afraid to lose it, then the stream would stop flowing, there would be no movement in it. But if it just lets go and trusts that it's always there, because it is always there and it's always connected, then it's just going to flow. And that, coming into that idea of non-attachment has just, it's changed my life. Actually, it's really changed everything. It's changed the game completely, because while there's a kind of a base level of sustainability, the less things in life that you need to maintain that, the freer you are. You know, the more you can move around in different environments and really thrive. And that's exciting. That's something pretty cool.
Okay. Wow.
A storm is brewing in the Trump campaign this morning as they wake up to some horrific headlines for them that have them.
Sorry, like my YouTube then just went into this Donald Trump thing, which was like, oh, is that part of the video? Okay. That never gets old. So I think that's a really good way of closing. We actually screened that video many months ago, but you weren't in the space, and I wanted to do it while you were here. Just for us to see how there are so many ways of experiencing this energy. I think a kind of warriorship, a peaceful warriorship, is like the opposite of fighting. And I think it's going to be a really interesting incoming latter 2024 into in some places what would be winter, what would be autumn. I think learning to hold fire even as we become water would hold like a clear spirit and identity, philosophy, and like wisdom that is based in love. I'm just going to give it like one last go for anyone who would like to share, and if not, then we could close.
I just want to continue on Tom. Yeah, thank you for sharing that video. That doesn't get old. And it was interesting when Tom was saying there was a lot of red when he was in Maya before, but what I find interesting with Tom's presence there was perhaps dealing with the red, but actually finding and living an indigo, you know, just to give context to people, because we have the colors in the mountain, the locations in Maya. And Tom, when I met Tom, he was living in his hammock at where we call the indigo, which is at the top of the mountain. And I thought that's very, what do you call it? That was very, very symbolic to how Tom is when he processes things. And it's very interesting that he shared, because when you're talking about pain, Tom's image actually came to my head, not about pain, but about the journey that we had at the Green. Again, to remind people of the context, we had the Green Shala before, where we were doing the sessions, and you used Tom's body to channel death. And it's something that was stuck in my head, and how comfortable he is with the I can't say embodiment, but the inner knowledge of what death is, and of course symbolic to perhaps what pain is as well. And just for the last sharing on this with Tom as well, facilitating Tom's body in Bali gave me permission, or I learned about his pain allowance, not pain avoidance, but pain allowance. Gave me permission. I wasn't able to say this to Tom all these years. Gave me permission to actually induce pain in sessions. Not anymore now, but before. So that I got really into inducing pain on facilitating to people. But of course, the people that have a lot of trust in me. And there's a lot of healing that happens there when I give myself permission to let a person, or let the people feel their pain, and me even causing pain, you know, like pulling the hair or groping the neck or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's just my sharing on that pain. allowance instead of pain avoidance gives space for a deeper healing sometimes. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I guess that could be it. Like, wow, thank you. Thank you for this. I think there's just so much, and I think if we kept sharing, it wouldn't stop. But we hope this inspires you to bring this color. The white red and the black red is like more or less like the same, more and more, like maybe we don't see the difference in it. And I think today maybe this is the time that we're able to really speak about this in the biggest and then the micro way possible. So off we go into the next color. I hope you have an amazing rest week next week. And just keep on going with your reflections, sharing them, and then passing onwards everything that comes up here, making this your own, and then giving birth to new articulations of what could not go deep enough. I think the world is really avoiding exactly what Flora spoke. I think that's really useful to end it there. The mother fear is the fear of dying. And when we confront that one, when you conquer death, it was Albert Camus who said, when you conquer death, like anything is possible. But when we resist it, it will hold all the fears. It will give birth to a lot of children. The fear of there not being enough time and not being loved and not having enough money. It's all rooted where. So I think however way we can unravel like what is hiding, the science that talks about that is the terror management theory, that humans have, you know, flown to the moon, we built skyscrapers, we're good doers, but a lot of our achievements are actually because we're terrified of our mortality, that no matter how much you own, one day you're gonna be food for the worms. And deep down we're hiding that, and we're not philosophizing as to what are we actually. And if the answer came, it would say nothing dies, you know. So if we can transmit that, if we can resonate that in the room, that's it, you know. That's pure objectivity that would speak. I mean, you would have to translate that. You can't just go around saying that nothing dies. But however way that can be communicated, that would help people just maybe relax and start to live, because they're able to die in the moment or to the moment. So if you can unmute and help me to close from here. Thank you so much. Good night. Good morning.
Thank you.
See you again.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. See.
Bye.
Ja, ist ja auch nichts so schlimm eigentlich. Ne?
Eso.
Pura vida.
Mm.